Well, hey, friends, welcome to Q on Q. We're glad you're with us again this week. We're in our third week of our series called Impressions. To give you a brief summary of what we've been talking about so far, impressions are a part of almost everything we do. We have talked so far about the marks that we leave on others through our words, our actions, and even subtle glances, and how those impressions align with God's call to love and understand one another. In the first part of the series, we looked at first impressions and second chances. Last time, we looked at impressions we have of ourselves and what God sees in us. Now, this week, in the third part of the series, we're going to sort of bring everything together from the first two episodes and talk about how we reflect God's character in and through our impressions. We've talked about how we give and interpret first impressions. We've talked about God's impression of us. But what about the lens we use when it comes to impressions? How does it reflect our faith and God living through us? We need to think about this for a second. What impression do you leave on others? When somebody meets you, whether for the first time or even in a brief encounter, what lingers in their mind after you're gone? Is it your kindness, your joy, your compassion? What lingers? What do they think of you? Or maybe it's something less flattering, like impatience or indifference. We might not realize it, but every interaction leaves a mark. We tend to focus a lot on the impressions others make on us. We remember the kind cashier who went out of their way to help, or the friend who always listens without judgment. But if we're honest, we also remember the times when somebody hurts us, dismissed us, or made us feel invisible. Those moments stick with us because impressions are powerful. They shape the way we see others and even how we see ourselves. But today I want to turn that idea around. What if we focused not on the impressions others leave on us, but on the ones we leave behind? More specifically, what if we considered how those impressions reflect God in us? As Christians, we bear His image. We're called to be a reflection of love, grace, and truth in the world. That's not just a suggestion, it's a core part of who we are, it's our identity. I'll be the first to admit, I don't always get it right. Sometimes my words are short, my patience runs thin, or I'm too wrapped up in my own concerns to show love the way that God calls me to. Maybe you can relate. But here's the thing. God isn't asking for perfection. He's asking us to lean into Him so that His character can shine through us, even in our imperfect moments. So today we're going to explore what it means to bear God's image and reflect His character in the impressions we leave on others. We're going to talk about what it means to live out His characteristics, how the fruit of the Spirit shapes our interactions, and how we can be intentional about representing Christ well, even when we fall short. From the very beginning, God made it clear that we are different from the rest of creation. This simple yet profound truth means that every human being, regardless of background, status, or abilities, carries a reflection of God within them. But what does that really mean? Does it mean we physically look like God, or is there something deeper at play? Being made in God's image isn't about physical appearance. It's about reflecting His character. Unlike the rest of creation, humans were designed to embody God's attributes: love, creativity, justice, mercy, and wisdom. We were made to think, to reason, to create, and most importantly, to love like He does. When we live in alignment with these qualities, we reflect God's image more clearly. But when we stray, when selfishness, pride, or sin take the lead, our reflection becomes distorted, kind of like a foggy mirror that doesn't give you a clear image of yourself. The world tries to redefine what it is to be valuable. Society often tells us that our worth comes from success, or appearance, or popularity. We're encouraged to shape our identity based on our personal achievements rather than God's design. But the truth is, no amount of success, wealth, or status can add to or take away from the image of God that is already within us. The problem is, we often forget this truth and we allow the world to define our value rather than resting in the identity that we've been given. If we truly believe that we are made in God's image, it should transform the way we see ourselves and others. It should remind us that our flaws, our mistakes, and our struggles don't erase the divine imprint that God has placed within us. Even in our weakest moments, we still bear His image. And the same is true for those around us. That means the person who frustrates us, the one who doesn't think like us, or the one who even hurts us. They also carry God's image. That truth should challenge us to see people through a lens of grace rather than judgment. It also means when we interact with others, we have an incredible opportunity. We can either reflect God's image clearly or we can distort it. When we show kindness, patience, integrity, we're mirroring God's character. But when we allow anger and selfishness or pride to guide our actions, we create an impression that is out of step with the one we're meant to reflect. Doesn't mean we have to be perfect. I already said before, perfection is not attainable by any of us. But it does mean we should be intentional. Our words, our actions, even our body language should point back to the God whose image we bear. And if we're made in God's image, how do we exactly reflect His character in our daily lives? Well, it's not just about knowing we are created in His likeness. It's about how we live that truth out. One of the clearest ways we reflect God to the world is through the fruit of the Spirit. Galatians chapter 5 says, "But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, forbearance, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control." These qualities are not just good virtues to strive for, they're evidence that God is at work within us. When we bear this fruit, we leave behind impressions that point others to Him. Think about how much of an impact these traits can have. When we encounter somebody who beams with genuine love and kindness, it's noticeable, and it's infectious too. It lingers with us. We remember them, and we remember their encounter. A peaceful presence in the midst of chaos can calm an entire situation. Patience in a stressful moment can change the course of a whole conversation. Gentleness can soften a heart. Self-control can prevent unnecessary hurt. These qualities aren't just abstract ideas. They shape the way we interact with people every single day. But here's the key. We can't produce this kind of thing on our own. This fruit, it isn't about trying harder or forcing ourselves to be more loving or patient. It's about allowing God to work in us, transforming us from the inside out. Just as a tree doesn't have to strain to produce fruit, it simply stays rooted and nourished. Our role is to remain connected to God so His Spirit can work through us. When we spend time with Him, when we seek His presence, the fruit of the Spirit naturally grows in our lives. Of course, it is easier said than done. We all have those moments where impatience takes over, where anger replaces kindness, or where fear can steal your joy. But when we recognize those moments, we can see them as invitations to draw closer to God. Instead of beating ourselves up for falling short, we can ask Him to shape us and help us grow. Over time, as we grow, we begin to reflect His character more consistently in the impressions we leave on others. One of the best ways to cultivate this fruit is to intentionally practice it in small, everyday moments. If we wait for a big opportunity to be patient, we're going to miss the countless little ones that we experience every day. It's easy to think about representing Christ in the big moments, when we're serving in church or going on a big mission trip or sharing our faith with someone directly. But what about the small, everyday moments? The way we talk to a cashier, the patience we show in traffic, or the kindness we extend to a coworker. These ordinary interactions might seem insignificant, but they're some of the most powerful opportunities we have to reflect Christ. Most people won't remember a single sermon we've heard, but they will remember the way we made them feel. Jesus didn't reveal God's love in grand, miraculous moments. He did it in everyday interactions. He noticed people that others ignored. He listened to their stories. He dined with them. He met their needs. What about the woman at the well in John 4? She wasn't a high profile figure, she was an outcast. But Jesus took the time to speak to her, offering her living water. Zacchaeus, the tax collector, he was despised by many, yet Jesus invited himself into his home. These weren't staged publicity events, they were everyday encounters that changed lives. What if we saw our daily interactions in the same way? The truth is, people are always watching. Now, not everyone is watching in a judgmental way like you might think, but the fact is that people see us in a way that takes note of how we carry ourselves. The way we handle frustration, respond to criticism, or engage in conversation says a lot about what's in our hearts. If we claim to follow Christ but are rude and impatient and dismissive, what kind of impression does that leave? But if we're consistent in showing kindness, humility, and grace, people will begin to see something different in us, something that points them to Christ. One of the biggest ways we represent that life daily is through our words. Our words can build somebody up or tear them down instantly. A simple compliment, an encouraging message, or a gentle response in the face of anger can leave a lasting impression. On the other hand, gossip, unnecessary sarcasm, or an unkind tone can do just as much damage. If we want to reflect Christ, we have to be mindful of how we speak to and about others. Beyond words, our actions matter just as much. Holding the door for somebody, remembering a coworker's birthday, offering to pray for a friend. These small acts of kindness might seem trivial or minor, but they communicate something powerful. They say, I see you, and you matter. That's exactly how Jesus treated people, and when we do the same, we carry his presence into places where it might not otherwise be seen. We can choose kindness in how we respond to a frustrating email. We can practice peace by not engaging in gossip or unnecessary conflict with somebody. We can show faithfulness in how we keep our word, even when it's inconvenient. These small choices add up, and over time, they shape the experiences people have with us. When we live out the fruit of the Spirit, people take notice, not because we're extraordinary, but because what they see in us is something different, something deeper. They may not be able to put their finger on it, but when we reflect God's love, his joy, his peace, and patience, people are drawn to it. They are drawn to him. That's the beauty of bearing the fruit of the Spirit. It's not about us looking good. It's about pointing people to the God working in us. It's also important to remember that representing Christ doesn't mean being perfect. I've said this several times today, but it's important to remind you when we have days that we fall short, when we lose our patience, we say the wrong thing, or fail to show love, it doesn't mean we're not trying. Even in those moments, we have an opportunity to reflect Christ through humility. Apologizing when we're wrong, asking for forgiveness, and making things right can be just as powerful as getting it right the first time. People don't need to see perfection. People don't want to see perfection. They need to see authenticity. And when we're willing to own our mistakes and grow from them, we show the transforming power of God's grace. So ask yourself, what fruit are you producing? When people interact with you, do they walk away having experienced God's love, kindness, or peace? Or do they experience impatience, frustration, or indifference? The good news is we don't have to do this in our own strength. God is always shaping us, refining us, and helping us bear more of his fruit. And as we grow, the impressions we leave will not just reflect who we are, but who he is. So as you go about your upcoming week, think about the impressions you're leaving behind. When people interact with you, do they experience Christ's love? Do they see patience, kindness, and integrity? Or do they walk away feeling unnoticed or unvalued? The way we represent Christ isn't just about what we believe, it's about how we live. And when we approach even the smallest interactions with intentionality, we create opportunities for God's love to shine through us in ways we may never fully realize. Well, as we come to the end of this conversation today and the end of this series, I want to challenge you to take a closer look at the impressions you leave on others. Every day, in big and small ways, we reflect something: our attitudes, our priorities, our character. But as people made in His image, we are called to reflect something greater: God's love, truth, and grace. The way we speak, the way we treat others, and even the way we carry ourselves can be a glimpse of who God is to the people around us. Whether we realize it or not, our lives are constantly sending a message. The question is, what message is that? It's easy to think that representing Christ is reserved for the big moments. People might forget what we say, but they'll remember how we make them feel, especially in those quiet, ordinary moments of life. And in a world that is so marked by division, indifference, impatience, the way we consistently show up with love and grace, even in those smallest everyday moments, can make all the difference. So how can you start living this out more intentionally? Well, I think it starts with awareness. Pausing to consider how we're treating others and whether our actions align with God's character. Means we're being mindful of our words, choosing patience over frustration, and extending grace even when it's tough. It means making the conscious decision every day to reflect the fruit of the Spirit in our interactions, even when nobody's watching. These small daily choices add up, shaping not only the way others experience us, but the way they see God through us. None of us will get it right all the time, but the beautiful thing is, God's always working in us. When we stay close to Him, we're going to naturally begin to reflect more of His character. And when we do, those impressions will point others to the one who created us in His image. Well, friends, I hope these conversations have challenged you and encouraged you to think more deeply about the impact you have on others and the way you reflect God's character. Our first impressions matter, but so do the second chances we extend. None of us will do this perfectly, but that's the beauty of God's grace. So as you take what we've talked about in this series and move forward, be mindful of the impressions you leave, be gracious in how you see others, and most importantly, stay close to the one whose image you bear. Because when we truly reflect Him, we don't just leave an impression, we leave a lasting impact for His kingdom. As always, I really do appreciate you tuning in. We'll see you back here next time when we'll have more for you on Q.